All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started so we don't run late. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We're going to be talking today specifically about the new SEC rules for cybersecurity. Joining me today is Farooq Wahab. He is our Director of Cybersecurity and leads our vCISO practice here at Accorian. I want to run through just quickly a little bit about Accorian, and then we'll jump into the main topic. I'm Sean Dowling, Vice President of the High Trust section and the vCISO side of the house for Accorian. And as I've mentioned, Farooq will be joining us today, and he's our Director for Cybersecurity. Accorian is a full-service cybersecurity and compliance organization that focuses primarily on preparing organizations for framework certifications, whether it be SOC 2, ISO, PCI, High Trust, whatever it might be, even SEC, as we're going to talk about today. We bring a full line of services to organizations to help them prepare and then also maintain their certifications once they get into that. So we will work with you on, figuring out where you stand within your cybersecurity, maturity in your organization. Then we'll work with you on, what the specific requirements are for the individual framework or the multiple frameworks that you may have to comply with. And then we'll also, bring ancillary services to the plate for you, whether it be, penetration testing, red and blue teaming, development of your BCDR plans, policy and procedure, writing or updating. So we do want to make sure that organizations, have the opportunity to meet all the requirements there. The only thing we really don't do today, and we do have partners that do this, is we're not the MSPs. We're not the guys that are going to come in and actually, roll out tools or do configurations. We will work with you and your technical side of the house on what those requirements need to be, for configuring, or what type of tools meet the standards, depending on the framework that you're trying to comply with. But we're not the guys that are going to go, sell you the tools and things like that. And again, like I said, we do have partners that work with you on that. And if you're in the need of somebody to come in to do that, we can definitely provide some key recommendations. Accorian as a whole, like I said, we do have a lot of service offerings, that kind of fit the full gamut of what needs to be done in the compliance side of the house. And we work with a myriad of different types of industries, across, a just, vast, framework of organizations like fintechs, healthcare, e-commerce, pretty much everybody you can possibly imagine we work with in some level or another. We are a global organization as well. So we are headquartered in East Brunswick, New Jersey, just outside New York, with primary offices in Bangalore. And then we have sub offices pretty much spread out through the globe to include Dubai, as well as Canada and some other locations. And we're constantly expanding there as well. Some of the framework stuff that we work with, I did mention like SOC 2, PCI, and High Trust, but we are experts when it comes to baseline NIST certification. So if you're in the FedRAMP or CMMC world, we have those type of experts that can come help you with that. GDPR, ISOs, we are one of the global leaders in ISO certifications. From a testing perspective, again, I mentioned some of the high levels that we can do from that perspective, but pretty much all your vulnerability testing can be handled within Accorian. And then adding on some of the umbrella services, if you will, like our vCISO program management, where we will sit with you and help you build your information security management program, or come in and help bolster what you currently have. So, if you don't have a CISO, we can come in and kind of be that role for you, or help you build into, what you need to have done in order to get to that next step of hiring a CISO. But we'll work with you on what it is to build out that organization. We'll supplement whatever we possibly can, and if you're interested in that, we do have a whole other presentation where we'll walk through, what the vCISO services look like. All right, without digging in too much more, I didn't want to waste a whole lot of time on the who we are and what we do. I do want to jump into the topic at hand today is going to be the SEC controls and the new changes that are out there. So again, joining me today is Farooq. Farooq, as I said, has got a tremendous amount of experience working in this realm. And he's going to start by walking us through what is what's the background with this, and what do these changes include, and how do they impact us in the cyber side of the world.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Thanks for the introduction. So, uh, as you mentioned, you're going to be talking about the new SEC rules on cybersecurity. So, the background about these rules is that back in July of 2023, the SEC actually issued uh, final rules with regards to cybersecurity. And the reason why I'm using the term final is that there was a whole consultation process which they engaged in uh, with the community, and based on that, they were able to issue new rules pertaining to cybersecurity. And these new rules pertaining to cybersecurity require improved and uniform disclosures about cybersecurity risks, strategies, governance, and incidents by the registrants or the listed companies. These rules actually take effect starting on or after December 15, 2023. And a brief background about what actually triggered this whole process. So the thing is that there were growing concerns about uh, consistent investor access to cybersecurity information due to digital transformations, AI, hybrid work setups, use of disruptive technologies like uh, cryptocurrency, blockchain, and that resulted in rising illicit profits from cyber threats, and this actually amplified the overall cybersecurity risks and costs. And I believe we all know that, uh, be it listed companies or be it unlisted companies, they are all on the target of the cyber criminals. And this triggered SEC to come up with SEC on cybersecurity rules, which requires organizations to constantly report on their various aspects of cybersecurity posture, which we'll be discussing in detail today.
Awesome, awesome. So I think some of the key things that we want to take a look at here, things along the lines of what's changing, what do we need to know, stuff like things like that. I think where we want to jump into is what are the final rules, what are the things that are key points that we have to talk to today to make sure people understand what's going on.
Okay, so I'll first talk about what people need to know, especially the people who are working for these listed companies which are registered with the SEC. So the final rule actually requires, as I mentioned, improved and uniform disclosures about cybersecurity risks, strategies, governance, and incidents by registrants. Now, I must caution the audience that this is not just reporting of breaches or incidents. Like usually we have a mandatory breach notification law in California, in the EU countries and in Canada, but this is beyond that. This is something that we'll probably talk in more detail, but it's about disclosures about risks, strategies, governance, and incidents by registrants. And then the rules that have been proposed would require registrants to disclose information about a material cybersecurity incident within 4 business days of determining that the incident is material. Okay, and we'll probably talk about what a material incident means, because quite often uh, people would define material incident as an incident which impacts an organization. At times, people might confuse a material incident by an incident which is just taking place within the organization and has no origins or is not dependent on the service provider. But in this case, they have also provided more details on that. And once we talk about the rules in detail, we'll talk about what a material cybersecurity incident means. So the key thing to note right now is a material cybersecurity incident needs to be disclosed within 4 business days after it is being determined that the incident was material. The other thing that the registrants also would need to provide on a regular basis or on a periodic basis is updated disclosures about previously reported incidents and also describe the policies and procedures, if any, for the identification and management of risk from cybersecurity threats. And also provide disclosures, and this is a really important piece, provide disclosures on the board's oversight of cybersecurity risk and management's role in assessing and managing this risk and implementing cybersecurity policies. So this talks about the fact that how effective is the oversight by the board, okay, and what are they doing about managing and mitigating these risks. So it's not just about reporting uh, incidents or material incidents, it's about how the organization on the board is maintaining oversight. Apart from that, the registrants are also required to disclose whether they have cybersecurity expertise at the board level. And if so, I mean, the organizations would be required to provide their details in terms of name and uh, their bio in terms of description of their experience. So this is what people need to know. Now, what's changing? Let's talk about that now. So as I mentioned, that what's changing is that previously there was no formal requirement for listed companies or companies which are registered with SEC to report on incidents. And in the past, there was no given time, like in this case, it's 4 business days. In the past, there was no requirement for reporting on the board oversight of the information security processes and monitoring or having oversight of cybersecurity risks. And so these are things which are new. So I think with this being said, I think we can take a deeper dive into what the rules are. So Sean, if you can share the slide, we can just go to the rules also.
Doing my best to get there.
Yeah, no worries.
Zoom's giving me a hard time today. I'm Zoom inefficient today. So here we go. All right. So all right.
Okay. So the first rule is about the disclosure of cybersecurity incidents. So thing to note over here is that, as I mentioned, a material cybersecurity incident has to be reported within 4 business days based on materiality determination without unreasonable delay. And one of the things that the audience needs to understand is that the time in between identifying an incident and determining the materiality should not be more. And what I mean to say that it should be not be more than a few hours, right? Should not be more than 2 to 3 hours. In fact, in this case, I think 2 3 hours would be even be more. So organizations need to be really careful in terms of how swiftly they are able to determine the materiality of the incident. That's the first thing. The other thing is that it's really important for the organizations who are going to be reporting these material incidents to describe the incident's material impact uh, or reasonably likely material impact. So what this means is that if there is an incident, like for instance, if an organization which is a healthcare company and is listed uh, has suffered a data breach, right? So it's really important for them, while determining the materiality, is uh, is to determine the impact also, right? In terms of, okay, what's the financial loss? What's the cost of losing business? Or, okay, what's going to be the loss in terms of reputational damage, uh, disruption of business, and also to ascertain the kind of fines they'll have to pay. So this is really important, and this has to be documented properly. The other thing which is also important to note over here is that uh, if you disclose that one or more of the above required items is not determined or is unavailable at the time of the filing. So it's really important that if there's some information which is not available, which impacts how the materiality of that instant is going to be determined, has to be documented. So the key thing to note over here is the determination of the materiality. That's number one. The other one is that whatever information you have about the materiality impact should be documented, and what cannot be documented should be mentioned, and it should be disclosed within 4 business days. So that's really, really important. The second piece talk more about the disclosure of uh, cybersecurity risk management and strategy. Okay, and this so basically, in short, 2 and 3 talk more about oversight and governance. So if we look at the second rule, it talks more about disclosed processes for assessing, identifying, and managing material risk from cybersecurity threats. So this is more about how organizations are identifying various risks arising from cybersecurity threats. So this talks about the whole process, okay, in terms of risk management, identification of risk, okay, making sure that those risks are properly listed, documented, and of course, what steps are being taken to make sure that the risks are either mitigated, accepted, okay, and how is that being reported at the management and the board level. So those processes have to be disclosed. Okay, the next one is quite interesting, and it's actually a best practice too. It's really important for organizations to make sure that the process for managing cybersecurity risks and threats are integrated as part of your enterprise risk management framework. And over here, the SEC rules also state the same. They are saying that you need to make sure that your risk management processes pertaining to cybersecurity risk are integrated as part of your overall risk management processes. Apart from that, we also need to understand that while describing these risks, it's important to include that uh, we also track and report on risks which have resulted as part of previous incidents, okay, and that have materially impacted the organization and the business strategy. So this means that if the organization has had an incident over the course of the past year or 6 months, or even beyond that, and if it had a significant impact on the organization, what kind of remediation steps did the organization take in order to reduce the risk level or to mitigate the risk? Okay, apart from that, as part of the second rule, it's important for the organization to disclose that, okay, if they have onboarded any cybersecurity consultants, auditors, or other third parties who are assisting the organizations in identifying or managing risk from the third party's perspective. So this was rule number 2. As we move to the rule number 3, this is something which is moving more on the food chain. So this is more about the board oversight. So as part of rule 3, organizations need to disclose that, in fact, they need to describe that how the board is ensuring proper oversight of risk from the cybersecurity threat perspective. Okay. And also identify and share information about the subcommittee of the board, which is responsible for having oversight of the cybersecurity risk. So basically, this information would be more like how frequently would the board subcommittee, which is responsible for having oversight of the cybersecurity risk, how often do they meet? If there are any important action items coming out from those board subcommittees, make sure that those are also reported as part of that. Apart from that, it's also required that the management committees or the positions responsible for managing cybersecurity risk, you will need to provide information about them. So, okay, who are the individuals who are on those committees? What's their background? Do they all come back with strong technical background or cybersecurity background, or is it a mix of that? So we need to provide that information also. And you'll also have to disclose whether and how management reports cybersecurity information to the board or committee or the subcommittee. So I think most of the people who are on this call who are cybersecurity leaders or compliance leaders, I'm sure that you in some shape or form are reporting on your cybersecurity threat to the board, perhaps on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, or twice a year. So as part of this disclosure, you guys you would be required to report on how frequently the cybersecurity risk or the overall cybersecurity information, or in some cases, you might even have a dashboard. How frequently is that being shared with the board? So this was an overview of the three key rules by Security and Exchange Commission.
All right, thanks, Farooq. It's a ton of information there, and I think it's it's key for everybody to understand some of all of this information. But some of the key points, I think I want you to kind of circle back a little bit, because I want to make sure we're very clear on how long do registrants have to disclose material incidents. I heard a date there, and it sounded kind of short.
Yeah. So it's short, and the reason for this being short is that globally, uh, there are various mandatory breach notification laws in place, which I believe the Security and Exchange Commission is trying to align with. Like we all know that with CCP in California, they have like a 72-hour, I think between 48 to 72 hours in the state of California. In Canada with PIDA, it's also anywhere between 48 to 72 hours. I know in EU countries with GDPR, it's also around 48 hours. So I think what SEC is trying to do is to align with all the other leading global breach reporting laws and standards to ensure that they align with that. So that's the reason that organizations are required to report this within 4 days. So it should not be after 4 days; it should be within the 4 days. The other thing which is also important to understand is uh, that the that the timing of the reporting of the incident comes into effect from the occurrence of the breach or the incident. Okay. So basically, what it means is that it doesn't come into effect from the occurrence of the breach, but it comes into effect when a company's legal team classifies it as a material incident. So let's just take for an example, like the incident response team of an organization comes across a scenario or an event which qualifies as a cybersecurity incident or a breach. Okay. They do an analysis, and based on that, they escalate that to their CISO. Okay. And then the CISO follows a breach response protocol in which they are required to engage their legal team. And in some cases, their cyber insurance companies also. So it's really important to understand is that once the legal team or the external legal consultant or the cyber insurance consultant organization has not determined the breach as material, the timing. So basically, the clock starts from the point where when the company's legal department has deemed the incident as a material incident. So that's really important. Okay,
Okay.
you cannot just start the time from the point where the incident is identified, and the reason being that it could be a false positive, it could be an incident which it is not material, and that's why it's important to make sure that the legal department weighs in. That's the first thing. The other thing is that this timeline also allows for potential delays in reporting incidents, and at times the incident could be something which may have or may impact other organizations and may require some kind of approval from the U.S. Attorney General, if required, if it's a critical infrastructure, or if it's an organization which has had an incident or a breach or which impact citizens of US in general, or perhaps can be classified as an incident which was initiated by a state actor, okay, and could threaten public safety or national security. And that's why it's really important for the legal team to weigh in so that they can probably ascertain the extent of the materiality and the impact, not just on the organization, but on the sector and on the country itself. So these are things for which you need to have the experts weigh in.
Is there like any logic behind the 4 days? Like, why only 4 days?
So basically, what SEC is trying to say is that they believe that this tight deadline will help protect investors from financial risk posed by cybersecurity incidents by giving them more timely data on the impact of the material cybersecurity incidents. So that's the reason. And as I mentioned, in some cases, uh, the disclosure may be delayed for reasons for national security or to safeguard some of the work which the investigators or investigating agencies might be doing. So it may vary from case to case, but generally the rule is 4 days.
Okay.
The other thing to take into consideration is that companies won't be penalized if they don't report an incident and have a reasonable basis for believing that the incident is not material. So as long as the companies have determined that the incident is not material, the legal counsel has weighed in, so they won't be penalized for that.
Okay. Okay. In your opinion, I mean, with all these changes and stuff like that, I mean, what's the true impact here that we're looking at to the businesses and the corporations that have to maintain these standards?
So, I mean, Sean, if you ask me, frankly, I mean, what I believe is that this is a huge change in culture. I'm sorry I have to say this, but what we have seen so far is that uh, usually the culture in public companies was that if you have an incident, let the IT people take care of that. Let the security shop take care of that. Okay. The level of involvement of the board and management was not that much. In many cases, quite often, what the board often gets is like a quarterly update or a yearly update or something which they're just fed by the CISOs or the CIOs. In this case, SEC is actually holding uh, the board of management responsible in terms of how cybersecurity risks are being managed. So, in a nutshell, the public companies will have to change a lot of their processes to adhere to these new requirements, including carefully evaluating the information they disclose about cybersecurity incidents, because it's a two-edged sword. Because companies need to be careful in terms of disclosing a material incident and what needs to be disclosed, because there could be a risk of a class action suit also. And that's why I spoke about the fact that for an organization to determine the materiality of the incident, the legal department has to weigh in. The other thing which we also need to understand is that there is a risk of uh, facing investor lawsuits, class action lawsuits. SEC could have enforcement actions, and this could result in reputational damage. So companies would have to uh, work in terms of changing the culture, make sure that the board and management are engaged, and they shouldn't shy away from bringing in third-party experts to help them in this journey, because it's not going to be easy. Okay, I mean, unless and until you're dealing with an organization which has a really mature cybersecurity oversight by the board, and they're in a good shape, otherwise there's going to be a lot that has to be changed.
Okay. I know, speaking of third parties, we're gonna shift a little bit into what we can do to help jump into this. I do know we've talked a lot here lately, not only with the preparedness and the readiness side of it. Organizations need to understand that you should be working with, or at least have, an incident response organization on retainer. Breaches are going to happen. We're in this world now where the bad guys are ahead of us, and they always will be. So I know, and again, we'll jump into what we're going to do, but I know from the perspective of trying to get additional third parties to come in, a lot of this organizations can't do this on their own, especially once a breach happens. You have to have professionals come in and help. And again, I know we've talked this in detail the last few days. So any additional information you want to add, to third party support, and then we'll jump into, our plan for helping organizations prepare and what we can do to get them ready.
Yeah. So, I mean, right before we talk about the other things, I think one of the things we need to understand, and I want to reiterate that, is that the SEC rules clearly state that if you are bringing in auditors, consultants, or security assessors, we just need to share that information with them. So this means that the Security and Exchange Commission is encouraging organizations to get third-party help,
Yeah.
right? And that's important. I mean, this is something that I believe it's a journey, and this is a problem that organizations cannot solve on their own, and they will need all the help in the world. I mean, if needed.
Yeah, good. I wanted to just make sure we stress that. All right, so let's talk about what we can do as Accorian to help organizations prepare for this, and what they need to be looking for from their third party support.
Sure.
Here, I'll bring up some of our offerings here, and you can talk through these.
Okay, so I think first let's talk about how Accorian can help, and then we can talk about the other offering. But I think some of the key things that stand out in terms of how can Accorian help organizations to be prepared in terms of complying with the SEC rules. So the first thing that comes to mind, and what we are currently offering, is an SEC readiness assessment. So in the SEC readiness assessment, what we can offer is that we can probably do a whole security maturity assessment in which uh, we can identify potential risks in terms of how the organizations are positioned in terms of complying with the SEC requirements. Okay. And then as part of the readiness assessment, we'll identify those risks and gaps, and then provide a remediation plan to the organization that if you need to comply with the SEC requirements, these are the strategic and tactical steps that you need to take. And then as part of the SEC readiness assessment, what we'll also provide, Sean, can you go back to the last slide?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So as part of that, yeah, as part of the SSC readiness assessment, what we can also help with is understanding the maturity of the incident response, escalation, and reporting processes. Now, this is something which I would encourage organizations to do in any case. I mean, it's really important to understand that, okay, how much are you guys ready in order to comply with the SSC requirements? Because, as I said, it's not just reporting on your incidents. You also have to report on how your board is effectively managing oversight over your cybersecurity threats. So it's really important to understand where you guys stand right now, what are the key gaps, and what steps need to be taken in terms of assessing that, okay, how close you guys are in terms of complying with the SSE requirements. So the first one is conducting a SSE readiness assessment. And if you ask me, not just a readiness assessment, we would not just be doing a readiness assessment or a gap assessment. We would be providing a tactical remediation plan too. But the second area where we can help out with is improving or evolving the cyber incident response and reporting capabilities. The thing is that most of the incident response processes which organizations follow right now, most of these processes are actually based on NIST cybersecurity framework or ISO 27001 or PCI DSS or any other standards. And in most of the cases, those incident response processes do not categorically define the materiality criteria. So as part of this service or this advisory service, we can help organizations revamp their incident response processes. And then as part of this advisory service, we can also we can do some handholding in terms of helping the organizations in terms of ensuring that, okay, how do they need to make sure that they comply with the disclosure obligations as the incidents are continually evolving, because I mean, not every incident is going to be the same, right? So that's going to be there. Apart from that, we'll also work closely with the organizations to make sure that they are able to learn from past incidents and are able to improve their security posture in terms of incident response. So it will not just be about improving your incident response process. It would be about doing a lessons learned exercise from your previous incidents and what steps have been taken so far. The third one is more about applying stakeholder coordination and orchestration process. This is more about making sure that the breach response protocol in terms of coordinating with the right stakeholders, being the legal folks in the organization, being any other stakeholders, uh, external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. There is a proper process for that, and we'll also make sure that that there is a proper accountability matrix in place for compliance and disclosure. Okay, and making sure that these disclosures are being uh, provided with transparency. So, and this is a critical piece also because it's really important to make sure that there's appropriate documentation and trail maintained for coordination and monitoring of these things. Like, and this is not just limited to instant disclosure. This is an ongoing oversight of how risks are being managed. The fourth area where Accorian can really help with is enhancing the overall cybersecurity governance framework, which is rule number 3. So this is more around strengthening governance by educating board and management. So doing workshops for them, doing tabletops for them, and having that discussion for them to make sure that the board has the required level of awareness. And this is not just about providing them awareness about cyber threats, but also providing them awareness about the global evolving cyber threat landscape. The other thing is that as part of this enhancement of the cybersecurity governance framework, we'll also work together with closely with the board members to foster the culture of responsibility and accountability, and also helping them implement an operating model for risk management, and also working closely with the board subcommittee. So these are the 4 key areas where Accorian can really help. And given the fact that Accorian has tons of experience in uh, security testing and certification. And now that we have a whole vCISO practice in place, and I'll talk about the whole vCISO practice also in a bit, uh, we bring the required experience, the right competence, and the right expertise to help organizations in this journey. So with that, allow me to talk about our vCISO practice. So in short, as I mentioned, those are the 4 areas where we can provide assistance to the clients. And in short, our vCISO offering that we have provides a dedicated point of contact to organizations, and would provide access to a team of experts that we have at Accorian. And as part of a vCISO offering, we can actually help organizations build information security programs to meet their business objectives and compliance obligations. Like in this case, it's going to be the HSE requirements. Next slide. So I won't spend much time on this. I think by in terms of hiring a virtual CISO or a fractional CISO, uh, organization have got can get a huge benefit in terms of financial benefits, operation benefits, and practically that's the best way to go because it's not just one individual. You have access to a whole team of SMEs who will be providing you assistance in your cybersecurity needs. Uh, and then as part of this, the fractional CISO offering, there are a bunch of things that you're going to be getting as part of that offering. So if you can go to the next slide. So as part of that, we can help organizations in developing or revamping the security strategy. As mentioned, advice on and guidance on security issues and incidents, revamping your security program, providing advice on your security projects, assisting IT and communicating security risks to the business, providing baselines on infrastructure and application cloud, and providing executive and board level education and executive dashboard. And all this aligns with whatever I mentioned in terms of providing guidance and assistance in terms of complying with SEC requirements. So that's it.
Great. All right. So I think a lot of the information here, depending on the organization, you're going to have to kind of weed through a little bit, see what applies to your organization, and then again, if you need help, if you want help, kind of navigating through this, we're going to be available, for you guys to do that. While we wrap up, the webinar here, there are a couple of questions I want to run through here that we did receive during the presentation. The first one is, can you share best practices on how to determine the materiality of cybersecurity incidents? And then it's a follow-on: should the materiality criteria be the same as used with SOC or different factors to be considered? Farooq, I think you muted yourself.
My bad, my bad. So interesting question. So, and I really wanted to talk about this, so I'm glad that somebody brought up this question. So, in a nutshell, the general rule for determining the materiality actually depends on uh, how we determine an actual risk. So so in this case, like like the best practice says, the likelihood should be substantial. Uh, Likelihood should be substantial enough for the investor or stakeholder to be impacted in some shape or form. And let's just say that the reason why they have used the term materiality is that uh, in case if there is an incident which has a significant impact, and over here in terms of the word significant, they're using the term material, and if that impacts the organization or its stakeholders in any way, and what I mean to say by any way is in terms of reputational impact, financial impact, and loss of business or cost of doing business. Okay, and if it's substantial enough from that perspective, then that incident would be determined as material enough. Now, if you ask me in terms of what are the best practices, uh, I mean, I would suggest that based on whatever standard your organization is following for risk management, make sure that you follow that. To be it Octave, be it the ISF model, or be it ISO, all of these standards and best practices do talk about how you need to determine uh, the likelihood or impact of a risk or an incident. I
All
hope
right.
that answers your question, Basim.
One more. Do these third-party cybersecurity service organizations that we mentioned, do they need to be recognized by the SEC for their competency?
I don't think so. Based on what we have seen so far, these organizations do not need to be listed or recognized by SEC, and I don't think SEC would be going down this rabbit hole. I think
Yeah.
right now what SEC needs is organizations to have a strong security posture in terms of having a proper oversight of the risk and reporting on these incidents.
Yeah, I would just to follow on to that, again, and you should do this with all your vendors, obviously, but do your homework on this and make sure that any organization that you're working with fully understands the changes and what the requirements are around this. So, again, it's not everybody, not every compliance company, not every cybersecurity company, fully gets this stuff. You want to make sure that you are bringing the right people to the plate to assist you, because you don't want to go down a path that you put a lot of effort and money into something, and then you're still missing the mark when it's time to report. So again, my recommendation again would be just do your homework on this. Make sure you are aligning yourself with organizations that have the expertise and the ability to support you in the areas you need. Great. That'll pretty much wrap it up for today. I do have our contact information here. If you have any additional questions, by all means, please reach out to Farooq or myself, and we'll set up some time to talk with you. Same thing if you do want to explore more opportunities with Accorian to help you through this or any of your other security or compliance needs, Corey, we're always here to help. But other than that, Farooq, I want to thank you. It's a great, great information. I know it's a lot, and it's probably going to take, some of these organizations, several passes to kind of get some of this stuff down to make sure that that they're doing what the SEC now requires. So, any closing words on this? Anything you want? Any parting statements you want to leave us with?
I think what I would say is that whenever there's a new compliance or regulatory requirement, organizations are at times perplexed about how they need to comply with it. I think what I would suggest is that uh, you need to make sure that your management is on board. You also need to understand that you need to onboard the right expert. And as I said, security is a journey, not a destination. So it takes time for organizations to get aligned with these things. So don't worry about it. I know the regulation comes into effect in December. You know who to call. So if you need help or any guidance, just give us a call and we help you guys out.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and please forgive me for my inability to manage the Zoom slides today, but I think we got it worked out there. We will share the slides out to everybody who was in attendance today. We'll be sending those out shortly. And again, please reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns or need help with anything. So enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you guys very much.